Thank you, Les, and I can assure you I won't tell you any more stories in being up here. Just maybe as a bit of an introduction, I spent yesterday all day thinking about safety, but probably from a perspective that I would hope I never ever end up in doing again. I spent a day with our UK board where we had what we call a day from hell with one of the legal firms here in UK. And we talked about corporate homicides and prosecution. And I can tell you, going through interviews, we had some quite hard, I think they were tougher than usual, old police inspectors in, and we tried to run basically a trial, just to see and to remind the board of the, the role and the responsibility of people. And I think what I took away from that is once you've done all the fact-finding, etc., you start really to talk about the corporate culture, talk about the safety culture, and you talk about senior leadership and what do you do to drive a corporate culture, and how do you define corporate culture? And that's very, very hard. And I think when I think about step change, and I think about all the challenges we have in the industry, and I think specifically in the context of competence, it really makes me reflect as a leader of what are the things we put in place, the training, the systems, the culture, the human factors, all these aspects that really drives the change in the industry. And when I look at step change, if I have that one up there, and the work that's happening in step change, I think UK is really in a unique position. Because we have, I think Les said around 25,000 people working offshore in our industry. And we have a setup here in UK that is very different from what we see elsewhere globally. We have a setup where we have a forum through step change where we can share knowledge and ideas and experiences. But more important, where we can also help, which I think is one of the big challenges, to drive standards across our operations. Every operator has its own system, own way of doing things, etc. And that's probably one of our biggest challenges as an industry, because we have a lot of people coming to our installations just for one hit or two hits, and then off to the next one and the next one. So how do we drive consistency in what we do, and how do we assure a common approach across the industry? And I think step change, along with HSE and other factors, plays a huge role in that. I've been a member of the step change leadership team for 3 years. And I've never experienced that we could not put something in the table in the meeting and challenge each other. So I think that's very sobering. But one thing is the leadership team and my role and Rod's role as co-chairs of the Competence Steering Group. I think what we really should recognize is all the work that's happening in the work groups and with the experts. Because as Dave said, I can only echo that, I'm not an expert in competence and training and skills by any means. But working with the steering group and seeing what's happening in the work groups, there's a lot of very competent people working across it. So for a group like ours on competence, we might be 15 people in the steering group, but if you then add up all the work groups and all the work that's happening, it might be 50, 60 people actually working on the things we're driving in the agenda. And it's all voluntary work. For most, it's people doing that on top of their day job because they're committed and they really have a passion for doing so. I think that's sobering, and it's great to see the turnout here today on this event. And I think we have a hard act to follow from the human factors part earlier this morning. When we talk about the role, and certainly the role that I see and Rod see as our role as co-chairs and not being the experts in the competence group, I think our role is really to bring together all the good work that's happening in UK. There's so many different work groups and people getting together to work to improve what we're doing as an industry. And I think what we try to do with the steering group is to create an umbrella and a way of helping to align that and coordinate that, but also helping with the link to the industry through the leadership team, etc., and saying what is the demand, what are the challenges we see working with HSE, etc., and how can we address that throughout the work programs in the different areas. So specifically on the competence work, there's been a lot of work put into actually trying to define what is competence. you ask that question, I'm sure we'll almost get as many answers as we have people in this room. How do you define competence? Skills, knowledge? So there's been a lot of work put into that. And also to define, so how as a working group, working with competence, how do we structure that and how do we move it forward? So we came up with this model, or the group has come up with this model, which is, we call it the onion. If anyone has a better word, we much like to hear that. But really trying to focus on what's at the heart, which is the basic training that we put our people through in the industry, the MIST, the BOSIET core training. But then expand it and say, how do we build on that and how do we put it into context and framework? So golden rules is one of the areas, we're not touching on that today, but Rod will talk more about that in the next steps. Most companies have something similar to golden rules. They might call it something different. OGP has defined golden rules, and we discussed that in the step change leadership team as well, and there's an appetite to try to make that more visible in the industry. So still creates the opportunity for companies to have their own, but if we can put that more into the basic training. So that's part of the ongoing MIST review to see if there's any way to incorporate that. And then we talked about safety leadership. We talked about this morning as well. And I think all agree that it's extremely important for supervisors at all levels in the organization to be able to possess those skills and drive that. But what is it? What do we mean when we talk about safety leadership? And what is the knowledge and what are the skills we would like to provide to our supervisors and leaders? So that's one of the other areas that the group is trying to work on as a future step. And then you'll find around the onion control of work, mechanical joint integrity, lifting standards, pressure testing, isolations, competent electrical persons. Those are all topics that have come out when we look at some of the biggest challenges we face as an industry. And I think probably more amplified where we are right now with the boom of activities across the industry. We have a lot of new people joining, either coming from the military, cross-training, or new people coming into the industry. So how do we ensure that we have some very strong standards and common approach that can really build the competence and the skills from the workforce? So that's the structure we have put in place. And today, we'll go into more detail on a couple of areas. So the MIST industry review, I'm sure there'll be a lot of feelings around MIST. So Emily and Harry will try to put, I guess, a bit more facts on the table and some discussion about what's part of the review and what have we learned so far from the MIST training. And then we also select the mechanical joint integrity part, which has had a huge take-up, and Susan is going to talk us through some of the lessons learned from there and how the take-off has been through the industry. And then you'll see the green circle up there, which is the framework. And then that comes down to what I started out saying. So how do we define competence and how do we put a framework in place that allows us to put some structure to the discussions? And that's actually going to be our first talk that Les will take us through. So with those words, thank you. I'll hand over to Les.